I want to start today by asking you to do something that might feel a little strange.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
I want you to just pause for a second and listen to the voice inside your head. Not my voice, your voice. The one that's, narrating your thoughts right now as you're listening.
That's a bit of a meta way to kick things off, isn't it?
It is, but stick with me. I have a question about that voice.
Okay.
What language is it speaking?
Well, for the vast majority of our listeners, the answer is going to seem painfully obvious.
Right.
If you're a native English speaker, that internal monologue is running in English. Simple. If you grew up in Madrid, you're likely narrating your life in Spanish.
Exactly. It feels like a one-to-one correlation. Language equals thought. End of story. But, and here is where we dive right into the deep end. The materials we are unpacking today, specifically this really groundbreaking text, Thinking for Learning, by Mel Rockett and Simon Percival, they open with an anecdote that it completely shatters that assumption.
Ah, yes. You're talking about the story of the bilingual teenager in Surrey.
That's the one. Let's set the scene. You have a teenage girl. Her father is English, her mother is French.
And she's perfectly fluent in both, not just conversational, truly bilingual.
And a researcher asks her that exact question. What language do you think in?
And you'd expect a simple answer, right? Both. Or maybe, it depends on who I'm talking to, something straightforward.
But that wasn't her answer at all. Her answer was incredibly specific, and honestly, it's just fascinating.
What did she say?
She said that when she is doing practical things like organizing her school bag or trying to solve a math problem, planning her route to the bus stop, she thinks in English.
So English is her doing language, her logistical language.
Exactly. It's for the cold, hard logic of getting things done.
But there's a but. I can feel it.
There's a huge but. When she is dealing with feelings, when she's upset, or she's trying to figure out if she likes a boy, or she's angry at her parents,
She switches.
she automatically, subconsciously switches to French.
Wow. That's profound.
It completely blew my mind because it implies that for her, the act of thinking isn't just one single monolithic process.
No, it has different textures, different modes.
She uses English for logic, French for emotion. Two different operating systems for two different kinds of tasks.
And this raises the massive central question that sits at the very heart of the book we're analyzing today. If thinking has different modes or languages, is it possible that many of us, monolingual people, are only fluent in one? And more importantly,
can we teach a language of thinking?
Exactly. Can we teach it to students, even if they only speak English?
And that right there is the mission of this whole text. We are dissecting thinking for learning. And I know, that title. It sounds a bit like a dusty module from a teacher training course in the 1990s.
It does sound a bit dry on the surface, I'll give you that. Thinking for learning.
But the implications are just huge. We aren't just talking about how to get kids to pass exams, not at all.
No, this goes so much deeper.
We are talking about rewiring the operating system of the human brain. We are talking about moving from a model of, just stuffing kids with facts to teaching them how to actually process reality, how to make sense of the world. And to understand why Rockett and Percival are so urgent about this, and remember, this text is from the early 2000s, but it feels more relevant now than ever, we have to look at the context they set up.
The big picture.
The biggest. They argue we are operating with this severe mismatch between our schools and our actual 21st century reality.
They call it the 19th century model versus 21st century needs. And it's a powerful frame.
It really is.
Let's zoom out, way out, to the biggest picture possible. Human history.
Okay.
When we were hunter-gatherers, education was a matter of life and death. It was immediate.
You had to learn this stuff.
You had to. You needed to know which berries were poisonous. You needed to know how to track a rabbit. If you didn't learn, you died.
That's high-stakes testing, quite literally.
Exactly. Knowledge was survival. Then we hit the Industrial Revolution. Society changed completely. We needed factories. We needed distinct roles.
And the schools, they had to change to match that new world.
They became factories. Mass production. We needed workers who could follow instructions, do repetitive tasks, stand in line, and have a baseline level of literacy and numeracy.
We didn't need them to be creative geniuses.
No, we needed them to be compliant. The whole system was designed to produce a certain kind of person for a certain kind of economy.
The shut up and do your work model.
Precisely. But now, we aren't in the factory era anymore. We aren't even really in the information age anymore. Not really.
You're in the knowledge age.
And the authors make this point that I think is so critical. The mere possession of information is no longer a competitive advantage.
Because I have a smartphone in my pocket. We all do.
Right. If I ask you, what is the capital of Peru? And you've memorized the answer, you have zero advantage over the person next to you who can just Google it in 3 seconds.
The value has shifted. Completely.
It's not about having the information.
It's about what you do with it.
That's it. The value is in generating new ideas. It's in taking this massive, overwhelming wash of data, which we are all drowning in, and making sense of it.
Connecting dots that maybe shouldn't connect.
Solving novel problems that no one's seen before. And the authors argue that our schools are largely still running on that old 19th century engine.
Fixed intelligence, separate subjects, memorization.
All while the world outside the school gates demands something totally, fundamentally different.
So the mission statement of this whole deep dive is, how do we upgrade the engine? How do we teach how to learn, not just what to learn?
That is the absolute core of thinking for learning.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics. What exactly is thinking for learning? Because the text breaks it down into 2 main ingredients, so I want to make sure we get the recipe right.
It's a hybrid model, really. On one side, you have what they call thinking skills.
And what are those exactly? Are we talking about, like, critical thinking?
That's part of it, yes. The source uses a definition from McGinnis, which I think is really helpful. Thinking skills are basically tools or strategies.
Tools for what?
Tools to search for meaning, impose structure on chaos, and deal with novel problems.
Okay, I like that. Impose structure on chaos. It sounds so active.
It is. Think of it as the software toolkit for your brain, the apps you need to run to deal with the world.
And what's on the other side, the other ingredient?
The other side is accelerated learning. This comes largely from the work of a guy named Alistair Smith.
And this is more practical.
Much more. This is the hardware, if you will. It's about how to set up the environment, how to use what we know from brain research to make sure that learning actually sticks.
So it's about engagement and speed of acquisition.
And understanding how the brain physically encodes memory. It's the how-to that makes the what of thinking skills possible.
The authors use an analogy in the foreword that I absolutely loved, is to explain how these 2 things come together in a classroom.
The shower nozzle analogy.
The shower nozzle. It's such a brilliant way to visualize the whole pedagogical debate.
It really is.
So, okay, imagine you're in the shower, you have one of those adjustable heads, you can twist the nozzle one way, and you get that really narrow, intense, stinging jet of water.
Right. It hits one spot on your back, it's intense, it's focused.
In a school context, this represents a specific, isolated thinking class.
Like, okay, class, it's Tuesday at 2 p.m., put away your history books.
It's time for our thinking lesson.
Exactly. We are going to learn how to problem solve for 45 minutes. It is explicit, it is concentrated, but it's totally isolated. It's that hard jet of water.
Right. But then you can twist the nozzle the other way.
And the spray fans out, it becomes a mist, it's wider, softer, and it covers your whole body.
This is what they call infusion.
Right. This is where you aren't teaching a separate thinking class at all.
Instead, you're infusing these thinking skills into everything.
The history teacher asks you to compare sources of evidence, which is analysis. The math teacher asks you to explain your method, which is metacognition.
So it's less intense in any one moment.
But it gets everywhere. It becomes the water you swim in.
What I really appreciate about Rocket and Percival, and this is why this book is so good, is that they don't take sides. They don't say the jet is bad, the mist is good.
No, they advocate for a pluralistic approach, a both-hands solution.
So sometimes you need the jet.
Absolutely. Sometimes you need the intense jet. If a student has absolutely no idea how to construct an argument, you need to stop and teach that skill explicitly. Give them the tool.
But the ultimate goal is the wide spray.
The ultimate goal is infusion. You want these skills to become so natural that they permeate everything the student does in every subject and eventually in life.
Okay, let's go a layer deeper into the philosophy. The text outlines 9 core principles of thinking for learning. And I really want to go through these because they dismantle so many old school beliefs.
They really do.
The first one is the biggest hurdle. It's the one you have to accept before anything else makes sense.
Principle 1. Intelligence is modifiable.
This is the foundation.
It is. If you don't believe this, you might as well just throw the book away. For a huge chunk of the 20th century, the prevailing view in the West was that IQ is fixed.
You're born with a certain size bucket for intelligence.
Exactly. And a school can fill that bucket with facts, but it can't change the size of the bucket itself.
So you're either smart or you're not. You're a math person or you're creative. End of story.
Which is incredibly depressing. And also, as it turns out, just scientifically wrong.
Completely wrong.
The source leans heavily on neuroscience here, this concept of plasticity. The brain physically changes in response to experience.
It's not a fixed object. It's more like a muscle.
A muscle is a great way to put it. We can grow new neural connections. We can thicken the corpus callosum that connects the two hemispheres. We can literally make the bucket bigger.
This shifts the role of the teacher so dramatically.
It really does. The teacher is no longer just a content delivery system.
They're what, a brain trainer?
They are an intelligence modifier.
Intelligence modifier. I love that. Sounds like a job title from a science fiction movie.
It should be on their business cards. But it requires a massive, massive mindset shift from the teacher and the whole school system.
You have to believe that every single kid in that room, even the one who is struggling the most, has the capacity to physically upgrade their brain.
With the right input, yes.
Okay, let's look at principle number 2. Challenge and interest lead to motivation.
This seems obvious on the surface, but the real nuance is in the phrasing they use. High challenge, low stress.
That feels like a contradiction to me.
What?
Usually, when I'm highly challenged, I am highly stressed.
That's because most of us have been conditioned by the traditional model to associate challenge with fear of failure.
Right. If it's hard and I get it wrong, I get a bad grade, I feel shame, so my stress goes way up.
Exactly. So the key is, how do you decouple them? How do you create an environment where failure is just data? Yeah, just information. Think about video games. If you're playing a really hard level and your character dies, do you have an emotional breakdown?
No, of course not. I just respawn and I try a different jump or a different strategy.
Exactly. That is a perfect example of a high challenge, low stress environment.
Because I'm motivated to solve the puzzle, but I'm not terrified of the consequences of a mistake.
Right. The brain releases dopamine when it solves a hard problem. That's the reward. But it shuts down when it feels threatened. Teachers have to find that sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone of cognitive struggle where learning actually happens.
Okay, principles 3 and 4 are participation is valued and collaboration. They feel linked.
They're very linked. This all leans on Vygotsky's social learning theory. The basic idea is we don't learn in a vacuum.
You can't just learn from a book by yourself.
Well, you can, but it's not the most effective way. We learn by rubbing our ideas up against other people's ideas. If a classroom is just silent rows of desks with the teacher talking, you are cutting off one of the primary mechanisms of learning.
You need the friction of dialogue.
You need the debate, the discussion, the building on each other's thoughts.
Principle 5 is mediation is essential.
We absolutely need to put a pin in this one. We are going to do a huge deep dive on mediation when we get to the thinking teacher section.
Sounds good. It feels important.
It is arguably the most critical skill for an educator to master in this whole framework.
Okay, pin in mediation. Principle 6, conceptual understanding.
This means moving beyond just isolated facts to the big ideas that connect them.
So not just memorizing the date of the Battle of Hastings,
but understanding the concepts of conflict or invasion or power, because facts fade. You'll forget the date. But the concepts, the big patterns, they stick with you.
Principle 7 is my favorite word of the day. Metacognition.
Thinking about thinking.
It sounds so abstract, but it's actually the core mechanic of how we improve at anything.
It is. It's a difference between accidentally solving a problem and knowing how you solved it so you can do it again.
Right. If a kid gets the right answer in a math problem, we usually just say, great job, and move on.
But Rocket and Percival would say, stop. That's a missed opportunity.
What should you do instead?
You ask them, how did you get that? What strategy did you use? Did you draw a picture? Did you work backward from the answer? Did you just guess and check?
Because if you can't name this strategy, you can't consciously use it again the next time you're stuck.
Exactly. Which leads right into principle number 8. Explicit strategies.
You have to give thinking a name.
You have to. You don't just say think harder to a kid. That's useless advice. You say, let's try using a conceptual map here, or let's use the odd one out strategy. You give them a handle to grab onto.
And finally, principle 9, bridging for transfer.
This is the holy grail of education.
The ultimate goal.
Can you take a skill you learned in history class and apply it to a problem in science class? Or even better, can you apply it to a decision about which car to buy 10 years from now? That's transfer.
And it doesn't happen by magic.
No. You have to explicitly build a bridge for the student to walk across.
So that's the philosophy, a really solid 9-point foundation. But let's talk about the actual human beings in the classroom. Let's talk about the students.
the thinking pupil.
Yes, and the source makes a really compelling argument that you can't even begin to have a thinking pupil until you talk about emotions.
Right. This is where we get into emotional intelligence, or EQ. And the source uses a really jarring, frankly shocking anecdote to illustrate why a high IQ isn't enough.
You're talking about the story of Jason.
The story of Jason.
Yeah, this story really stopped me in my tracks when I read it.
It's referenced from Daniel Goleman's work on EQ. Jason is a star pupil, a high schooler in Florida, straight A's. He wants to go to Harvard Medical School.
He has a brilliantly high IQ. On paper, he is the perfect product of the education system.
The valedictorian type, the kid every parent wants.
Absolutely. But then he gets a bad grade. Not even a failing grade. A B or something on a physics test.
A minor setback for a brilliant student.
You would think. But what does he do?
He takes a butcher knife to school and he stabs his physics teacher in the collarbone.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, the leap from I got a B to I will commit a violent felony is staggering.
It is. And fortunately, the teacher survived. But the question Goleman and the authors pose is this: how can someone so smart be so incredibly stupid?
Right. Because rationally, logically, stabbing your teacher is not a good strategy for getting into Harvard.
It's a pretty solid strategy for going to jail.
Exactly. It is a catastrophic failure of emotional intelligence.
He couldn't handle the frustration, he couldn't manage the impulse, he couldn't deal with the perceived failure. The argument here is that academic intelligence is completely useless, or even dangerous, if it's not paired with the ability to control your impulses and handle setbacks.
So if you want a thinking student, you actually need an emotionally intelligent student first.
Fair.
The EQ has to come before, or at least alongside, the IQ.
You need balance. The authors talk about achieving the flow state. Athletes call it being in the zone.
I've heard of that.
It happens when the rational brain and the emotional brain are working in perfect harmony. But if your emotions are haywire, if you're scared or angry or insecure, the rational brain literally cannot function properly.
Is that a biological thing?
Yes, absolutely. The amygdala, the brain's threat center, hijacks the whole system. It floods you with cortisol. And the prefrontal cortex, the sophisticated thinking part of your brain, basically goes offline.
You literally cannot think your way out of a state of pure rage or fear.
You can't. You have to regulate the emotion first.
So can you teach this? Can you teach a kid not to be a Jason? Can you teach emotional regulation?
The source says, yes, you can. They point to a project called the Discovery Project in Portsmouth as evidence.
Okay, tell us about that. What did they do?
This was a really holistic approach to teaching EQ. It wasn't just a special class for the troubled kids.
It was for everyone.
It involved everyone: the head teachers, the pupils, the support staff, even the dinner ladies.
The dinner ladies. Why them?
Because the school environment is everywhere. A kid might have an emotional meltdown in the noisy cafeteria, not the quiet classroom. If the dinner lady knows how to recognize emotional cues and how to de-escalate a situation, that changes the entire culture of the school.
That makes so much sense. So what did they do practically? How did they teach it?
One of the key tools was teaching self-talk.
Like that internal monologue we started the whole deep dive with.
Exactly like that. Teaching kids to listen to that internal voice, to recognize when it's becoming negative or destructive, and giving them the tools to consciously rewrite the script.
So instead of, I'm stupid, I failed this test.
It becomes, okay, I made a mistake on that question. What do I need to understand so I can fix it next time? It's a subtle but life-changing shift.
The text also draws this really sharp distinction between two types of students, the compliant student versus the intentional learner. And I have to say, I felt this one in my bones because I think for most of my school career, I was definitely a compliant student.
I think most of us were. The entire educational system is pretty much designed to reward compliance.
Sit down, be quiet, do the work, get the gold star.
Right. The compliant student wants to please the teacher. Their motivation is entirely external. They want the grade. They view learning as a transaction. Tell me what to do to get an A.
Whereas the intentional learner, they're different.
The intentional learner actually wants to understand they are driving their own learning bus. They are aware of their own learning process. They have ownership.
So how do you make that shift? How do you turn a classroom of compliant kids into a room of intentional ones?
You have to change the culture of the classroom itself. The source talks about creating a community of learners. This idea comes from Brown and Campion's theory.
And what's the core idea?
It's the idea that knowledge isn't just flowing one way, from the teacher's head to the students' notebooks. It's distributed across the entire room. Every person in there is a resource.
the book gives this great specific example from a place called Paul's Grove Primary School, talking about the rituals they used. I love examples like this because it shows what it actually looks like on a Tuesday morning.
Yes, Paul's Grove is a fantastic case study. They use these very specific daily rituals to embed this culture of thinking into the very fabric of the day.
Look what?
For instance, they used a smart board first thing in the morning to explicitly talk about learning styles.
Oh, you mean VAK?
Visual, auditory, kinesthetic. The kids knew their own preferred styles. A 7-year-old could actually say, I'm a visual learner, so I really need to see a diagram of this.
That's incredible. That is intentionality. That's a kid taking ownership of how their own brain works.
It's metacognition in action.
And my favorite acronyms from that school were Wilf and Tibbs.
Laughs. It sounds like a cartoon duo, doesn't it? Here come Wilf and Tibbs to save the day.
It totally does. But Wilf stands for what I'm looking for.
Which is just the teacher being completely transparent about the goal of the lesson. No guessing games.
Yeah.
Here's the target.
And Tibbs is the one I love. This is because...
That's the game changer. We are learning how to calculate percentages, and this is because it will help you understand discounts when you go shopping, or it's the basis for understanding statistics in the news.
it connects the learning to a real purpose.
If you don't give the because, you just get compliance. Kids will do it because you told them to. If you explain the because, you invite intentionality. You get buy-in.
Let's shift gears slightly to the actual structure of thinking tasks. The source brings up Bloom's taxonomy. Now, I feel like anyone who has ever stepped foot in a teacher's college has seen Bloom's pyramid.
Oh, it's the classic hierarchy. It starts at the bottom with the simplest cognitive skill, knowledge, which is just listing facts. Then it moves up through comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and finally evaluation at the very top.
But the expert analysis in the book really challenges how this is usually applied in schools.
It does, because the trap that teachers often fall into is thinking that this pyramid is a ladder you climb as you get older.
Right. They think, okay, the little kids in kindergarten, they do the bottom stuff, listing colors, finding shapes. When they're 12, maybe we'll let them analyze a poem. And when they're 16, then they can synthesize different ideas. And Rocket and Percival's take on that is...
That's absolute garbage.
Bliss.
They argue that young children are incredibly capable of the highest level thinking, synthesis, and evaluation if you scaffold it correctly.
So you don't have to wait until they're teenagers to ask them to judge something or to invent something new.
No, in fact, waiting might actually kill their natural curiosity. A 5-year-old is constantly evaluating the world and synthesizing new ideas. We just need to give them the language and the structure to do it in an academic context.
That's a perfect segue to our next section, the thinking teacher. Because you can't have these high-level philosophical conversations with 5-year-olds unless the teacher knows exactly what they are doing.
Exactly. And this brings us right back to that word we put a pin in earlier.
Mediation.
Mediation.
Okay, let's unpack this. The text uses the proverb. And I know it's probably the most overused proverb in the history of the world.
Is it the one about the fish?
It's the one about the fish. Give a man a thought, he eats for a day. Teach him how to fish, he eats for a lifetime.
It is a cliche, but honestly, it's the perfect description of what mediation is.
How so?
Well, if a teacher just gives a student the answer, the capital of France is Paris, that's giving them a fish, it solves the immediate problem, but teaches nothing.
But mediation is teaching the fishing technique.
It's teaching them how to find the answer, how to think through the problem.
They reference Feuerstein's theory here. Can you break that down for us without getting too bogged down in the academic jargon?
I'll try. Imagine a simple diagram. You have an S, which stands for stimulus. This is the world, a book, a math problem. And you have an O, which stands for the organism, the student.
Okay, S and O.
In a direct, unmediated learning model, the stimulus just hits the organism directly. S leads to O, which leads to a response.
Like touching a hot stove. The stove is the stimulus, I am the organism, my response is to pull my hand back. I learn it hurts.
Right. That's simple learning. But complex higher-order learning requires an H in the middle, a human mediator.
The teacher.
The teacher. So the model becomes stimulus-mediator-organism response.
The teacher gets in between the world and the student.
Exactly. They don't just pass the world on unfiltered. They filter it, they frame it, they organize it, and then they present it to the student.
So the teacher is like a lens on a camera.
That's a perfect analogy. They are framing the view. They aren't just delivering content, they are shaping how the student experiences that content.
So they might say something like,
They might say, look at this historical document. Ignore the date for a minute. I want you to focus on the emotional language being used here. What does that tell you about the author's purpose? That is mediation.
and this connects to Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, right?
Yes. Or what the CASE project Cognitive Acceleration through Science Education calls the zone of cognitive conflict.
Cognitive conflict. That sounds really intense.
It is, and it's supposed to be. It means the teacher's job is to push the student just beyond what they can comfortably do on their own.
Into the struggle zone.
Into the productive struggle zone. If the task is too easy, there's no conflict and therefore no new learning. If it's way too hard, it's just frustration and the student shuts down. The mediator's art is holding them in that slightly uncomfortable zone where their brain is forced to grow.
And to do that, the teacher has to be incredibly active in the classroom. They can't just stand at the front and lecture.
No, absolutely not. They have to be constantly asking questions, probing, and crucially, they have to model their own thinking process.
This goes right back to metacognition, making thinking visible. There is a fantastic quote from Year 9 pupil in the text that sums this up perfectly.
What's the quote?
The student says, if I hadn't been talking about it, I wouldn't have recognized it.
Wow. That's so powerful.
Isn't it? It shows that the skill, the learning, it didn't really exist for that student until they verbalized it. The act of talking about it made it real.
And teachers have to model this constantly. They have to be willing to be vulnerable and stand at the board and say, okay, class, I'm actually a bit stuck on this problem. Let's think it through together. My first instinct is to try this. No, that didn't work. Why not? Oh, I see my mistake now.
They have to show the struggle, show the messy parts.
They have to demystify the aha moment. Students often think the teacher just knows the answer by magic. Showing the process, the messy, backtracking, frustrating process of real thinking is one of the most valuable things a teacher can do.
And then, after the task is done, reviewing that process. Not just, did you get the answer right, but how did you get there? What was your journey?
That's the debrief. That's where the transfer we talked about happens, when you solidify the how, not just the what.
The source also talks about a shift in assessment, moving from summative to formative assessment.
This is a huge shift in mindset. Summative assessment is the final exam. It measures what you learned at the very end. It's an autopsy.
An autopsy. That's a bit grim.
Well, it is. By the time you get the results, it's too late to fix anything. The learning is over.
So what's formative assessment?
Formative assessment is a checkup during the learning process. It's about diagnosing misunderstandings as they happen so you can intervene and fix them in real time.
And they list some specific practical tactics for this. Wait time is a big one.
Huge. Research shows that most teachers, when they ask a question, wait less than 1 second before calling on someone or just answering it themselves.
1 second. That's barely enough time to even process the question.
Exactly. We are deeply uncomfortable with silence in a classroom. We think silence means the lesson is failing.
But thinking takes time.
Thinking takes time. If you ask a complex, high-level question, you have to give them 3, 5, maybe even 10 seconds of pure silence to process. You have to explicitly signal that silence is the time when the work is being done.
Another tactic was no hands up.
Yes. No hands up can be controversial, but it's incredibly effective.
Why? What's the problem with putting your hand up?
If you ask for hands, what happens? The same 3 or 4 bright, confident kids shoot their hands up immediately. The Charlottes and Jasons of the class.
And the rest of the class?
The rest of the class checks out. They mentally disengage because they know the smart kids have got it covered. They don't even have to try.
So you just cold call students? That sounds terrifying for them.
You don't just cold call. You use a strategy like pair and share first. You pose the question and then you say, okay, discuss this with your partner for 30 seconds.
So everyone has to engage.
Everyone has to talk about it. Then you pick someone at random to share what their group discussed. It lowers the stakes massively. You're sharing the group's idea, not just your own, but it keeps every single person in the room accountable for thinking.
Okay, we've covered the philosophy, the student, and the teacher. Now I want to get into the really fun stuff. The part that feels like a box of tools.
The toolkit. The actual strategies.
This is part 4 of our outline, and it's the most practical section. We are going to look at 4 specific strategies from the book. Philosophy for children, odd one out, mysteries, and living graphs.
Great. Let's start with P4C philosophy for children.
This one is so fascinating to me because it's not about teaching kids Plato or Aristotle.
No, not at all. It's about developing what they call reasonableness. It's about practicing ethical thinking and reasoned debate.
The setup is important, right?
Very. It's usually a circle, no desks in the way. The teacher acts as a neutral facilitator, not an expert with the answers. And crucially, there is no single right answer to the questions being discussed.
The source gives a transcript of a P4C session that I think we have to perform, because it perfectly illustrates how this works in practice. It's the granny or goldfish scenario.
A classic ethical dilemma scaled for kids.
Exactly. So the context is a year 5 class that's, 9 or 10 years old. The teacher is talking to a student named Charlotte. I'll be the teacher, you can be Charlotte.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm channeling my inner 10-year-old. My cat is named Zephyr.
Yeah.
Laughs. Perfect. Okay, so Charlotte, do you have any pets?
Yes, I have a cat and a guinea pig
Yeah.
and a goldfish. The cat is called Zephyr and the guinea pig is called Gip.
Do you like them?
Of course. Everyone likes their pets. They're part of the family.
How would you feel if something awful happened to one of your pets?
I'd be really sad. I had a rabbit once, but a dog got in our garden and ate it. I cried for days.
Okay, that's sad. Now, have you heard of Africa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a long way away. They have jungles there and wild animals like lions and zebras.
There are people there as well. Millions and millions of them.
I know that.
Would you care if someone you didn't know in Africa was hit by a bus?
Not much, really. I mean, it's sad, but it probably happens all the time. I don't know them.
Okay, so here's the choice. Would you rather someone you didn't know in Africa was hit by a bus or your goldfish dies?
I'd rather someone was hit by a bus. I love my goldfish.
Breaking character. Whoa. Okay, let's just pause right there. That is brutal, unfiltered honesty from a 10-year-old. It is. But look at what the teacher does. She doesn't scold her. She doesn't say, Charlotte, that's a horrible thing to say. A person's life is more important than a fish.
No, she accepts the premise and just pushes the logic. She ups the stakes.
Exactly. She validates the feeling and explores the reasoning.
Right. Back in character. Okay, Charlotte. What if it wasn't one person? How about 10 people killed in a bus crash?
I still don't want my fish to die. It's my fish.
What if the choice is between your goldfish and 1,000 people killed in an earthquake? What if you had a magic button and you had to choose one?
Pauses for a long time. Maybe the people are more important then. 1,000 is a lot.
Okay. So what if it's between the 1,000 people in the earthquake and Zephyr? Your cat.
No way, not Zephyr. I love Zephyr.
And scene?
It's just amazing, isn't it? The journey she goes on in that short exchange.
It's incredible because she actually concedes the logical point that 1,000 people are objectively more important than one goldfish. But she draws this hard emotional line at her cat.
And that is the lesson. The goal isn't to force Charlotte to agree to sacrifice her cat. The goal is the wrestling. It's the process of justifying the argument. Why is the cat more valuable to her? What is the difference between emotional proximity and abstract ethical value?
This is deep, deep philosophical work, and they are doing it with 10-year-olds.
And they're doing it in a safe space where Charlotte can be totally honest about her inherent bias without being shamed for it.
If the teacher had judged her at the first answer, the thinking just stops. The defensive wall goes up.
P4C is all about creating that safe space for dangerous thoughts.
Let's move to the second strategy in the toolkit. Odd one out.
This one sounds like a kid's game show or something from a puzzle book.
It does, but it's deceptively simple and incredibly powerful. It looks like a simple test, but it's actually a justification exercise.
And the key, as the book points out, is that ambiguity is your friend. There shouldn't be one obvious right answer.
So the classic example they give in the book is 3 items: a tractor, a duck, and a zebra, which is the odd one out.
Okay, let's play. My first thought is the tractor is the odd one out because it's mechanical and the other 2 are living animals.
That's a valid argument, a perfectly logical reason. But I could argue that the zebra is the odd one out.
Why the zebra?
Because it's native to Africa, whereas the tractor and the duck are both commonly found on a farm.
Ah, I see. You're classifying by habitat or context. Also valid.
Or, to get really creative, I could say the duck is the odd one out because it has 2 legs, the zebra has 4 legs, and the tractor has 4 wheels. So you could group them by having 4 points of contact with the ground.
That's a bit of a stretch, but I absolutely love the lateral thinking. And it's a valid argument if you can explain it.
You see, the point isn't the answer. The point is the argument. The deeper layer is finding the hidden connections. Tractor and duck equals farm. Tractor and zebra equals 4 legs. Duck and zebra equals animals.
It forces the student to look at the attributes of the items, to compare and contrast them, and to build a logical case for their choice. It's not about guessing what's in the teacher's head. It's about constructing a reasoned argument.
And they use this in serious academic subjects, too, not just with barnyard animals.
Right. They give the example from the CAME Project Cognitive Acceleration in Mathematics Education.
The list of shapes.
Yes. The teacher presents 4 terms: cuboid, cylinder, cone, sphere. Find the odd one out.
And the goal isn't just to have them pick one. It's to see if they understand the mathematical terminology.
Exactly. Does the student use words like vertices or edges or curved faces to justify their choice? If a student says the sphere is the odd one out because it's the only one with no vertices, you know immediately that they understand what a vertex is.
It's a stealthy way to test vocabulary and concept mastery without giving a boring definitions quiz.
It's assessment for learning, not of learning.
Okay, strategy number 3, the mystery strategy.
Who doesn't love a good mystery? This one is brilliant for engagement.
The example here is the Bangladesh floods mystery, a geography lesson.
So the setup is this. You give the students a big overarching question. In this case, it's, why did the flood of 1998 have such a devastating effect on Bangladesh?
And crucially, you don't give them a textbook chapter to read to find the answer.
No, that would be giving them the fish. Instead, you give them a stack of cards, maybe 30 or 40 little slips of paper. Each card has one single isolated piece of information on it.
Like one card says Bangladesh is a very low-lying country. Another says there was heavy snowmelt in the Himalayas that year. Another says many of the country's coastal mangrove forests had been cut down.
And you have to include red herrings, pieces of information that are true but irrelevant.
The Prime Minister of Bangladesh at the time enjoys drinking tea.
Exactly. The student's first job is to work in groups to sort these cards. First, they have to filter out the junk, the red herrings. Then they have to categorize the rest.
Which are natural causes, which are human causes, which was the short-term trigger cause that set the whole disaster in motion.
It's an exercise in narrative construction and understanding causality.
It seems to me that it mimics real life so much better than a textbook.
It does. This is how we experience the world. We are bombarded with disconnected data points every single day. The news, social media, work emails. We don't get a neat textbook explaining our lives.
We just get the snippets.
We get the snippets.
Yeah.
And the essential skill of the 21st century is being able to filter the noise, find the underlying pattern, and build the causal link to understand why things happen. That's what the mystery strategy teaches.
Okay, the 4th and final tool in this section. Living graphs and concept maps.
This is all about making thinking visual and dynamic. It's a great way to turn a boring chart into a lively debate.
So explain how a living graph works. It sounds very active.
It is. Imagine you have a huge graph on the floor made with tape or on a big whiteboard. Let's say the horizontal x-axis is time and the vertical y-axis is impact on population. You're studying, say, the Industrial Revolution. You give student groups a set of cards with key events on them. Invention of the steam engine, first child labor laws, development of vaccines. Their job is to physically place the statement on the graph where they think it belongs.
So they have to make 2 judgments. When did this happen on the x-axis, and how big of an impact did it have on the y-axis?
Right. But the real magic happens when 2 groups disagree. One group puts the invention of the steam engine at a massive impact level. Another group puts it slightly lower. They have to stand up, go to the graph, and argue it out, using evidence to justify their placement.
It makes the data visceral. It makes history a debate, not a list of facts.
And it takes the abstract and makes it kinesthetic, which is fantastic for those learners who need to move to thing. It serves all the learning styles we talked about earlier.
Okay, so we have the core philosophy, we have the thinking student, the mediating teacher, and this brilliant toolkit of strategies. But now we have to talk about the environment. Part 5, the school and change.
Because you can do all these fun games in one teacher's classroom, but if it doesn't stick and spread, what's the point?
This brings us right back to that holy grail we mentioned earlier.
Bridging and transfer.
The text mentions a great example from Larkman First School. They had this very common problem where kids were learning math skills in their math lesson, but when they went to science class an hour later, it was like they'd never seen a graph before.
This is the classic silo problem in schools. The kid thinks, I do graphs in math class. This is now science class. I don't do graphs here. The learning is stuck in one context.
So what was the solution at Larkman? What did they do?
They realized they had to explicitly teach the connection. You can't just hope the students will notice it on their own. The teacher has to literally say, okay, everyone, remember that skill we used yesterday in math to plot data points on a graph? We are going to use that exact same tool today to measure our plant growth.
You have to build the bridge for them.
You have to name the bridge and show them how to walk across it.
That's what they call near transfer.
Yeah.
Right. Same subject or a very similar context.
Right. Far transfer is the really hard one. That's taking a skill and using it in a totally different, non-academic context.
Like in real life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source lists some great examples, like the process of deciding which new trainers to buy. That's a complex decision-making process.
It is. You're weighing cost, style, function, peer opinion.
It's a thinking strategy. It might be situation, options, consequences, solutions, or deciding to move out of your parents' house for the first time.
That's a massive cost-benefit analysis.
It is. And if we can get young people to realize that the thinking tool they use to analyze the causes of the Bangladesh floods is the same fundamental tool they can use to analyze their first apartment rental budget, then we've truly won. That is the ultimate goal of education.
But implementing this kind of change across a whole school is incredibly hard. Teachers are busy, the system is rigid, there's pressure for test scores.
There is, which is why the source references a concept from David Hargreaves called tinkering.
Tinkering, like in a workshop.
Exactly. It means that meaningful change doesn't have to be a massive, top-down, terrifying revolution. It can be small-scale. It can be action research.
So just one teacher trying one thing.
One teacher or a small group trying one thing, like introducing P4C once a week for 10 weeks and just seeing what happens. They gather data, they reflect. It's less threatening.
Let me give the Tuxwood First School example for this.
Yes. They decided to use inquiry drama to support their P4C work. They would hot seat characters from stories to try and build empathy before a philosophical discussion. They tinkered with the method to see if it would improve the quality of the dialogue.
And the Staub-Hilget example. That one had some hard data.
This, for me, is the most compelling data point in the whole book. They tracked the types of questions that students asked in class over a term. They found that after just 10 weeks of doing philosophy for children, the number of simple, factual recall questions the kids asked, it dropped to zero.
No, not at all.
Zero. They stopped asking, what is the answer? But the number of higher-level questions, the speculative, analytical, what-if questions, it doubled.
Wow. They fundamentally changed the way the kids interrogated the world around them in just 10 weeks.
It's a profound result. It proves that first principle we started with.
Intelligence is modifiable.
It is. It proves that thinking is a learned behavior. It's a muscle you can train with the right exercises.
So we've been on quite a journey here. From the bilingual brain of a teenager in Surrey to the devastating flooding in Bangladesh, from ethical dilemmas about goldfish to stabbing physics teachers.
It's a very wide landscape, but it's all connected.
If we try and synthesize all this, if we bring it all together into one core message from Thinking for Learning, what is it?
I think the core message is that for a very long time, we have been looking at education completely upside down.
How do you mean?
We've been focusing obsessively on the what, the content, the facts, the curriculum, the tests. But the what is fleeting and increasingly available to everyone instantly. The how, the process of thinking, the strategies for learning, the emotional regulation to handle challenges, that is the engine. And the book's central optimistic claim is that the engine can be upgraded.
We can upgrade the human operating system.
We can. We can teach people how to be smarter, more reasonable, more collaborative, and more emotionally intelligent.
So for the listener right now, maybe they aren't a teacher, maybe they work in an office, or they're a parent, or they're just trying to navigate this crazy, complex world. So what? Why should they care about a book on educational pedagogy?
Because you're always a learner, whether you're in a classroom or not. The world is changing faster than it ever has before. If you are just relying on what you already know, on the facts you learned years ago, you are becoming obsolete. You have to be an intentional learner in your own life.
You have to ask yourself, do you look for the odd one out in your business data to find a new pattern?
Exactly. When you're in a tense meeting and everyone is agreeing, do you have the courage and the skill to ask a difficult philosophical question? Do you have the EQ to recognize when you're starting to feel like Jason's stressed, angry, and shutting down, and use self-talk to get yourself back into a productive flow state?
These aren't just school skills, they're life skills.
They're survival skills for the knowledge age. It's that fundamental.
I want to leave our listeners with one final provocative thought, and it goes right back to the beginning, to Charlotte and her cat, Zephyr.
The granny or goldfish dilemma.
We are all Charlotte. We are all wired with biases. We all instinctively care more about our own cat, our family, our community, our side, than we do about the abstract suffering of 1,000 strangers far away.
It's human nature. Emotional proximity is an incredibly powerful force.
It is. But here is the provocation. If we explicitly taught thinking as a subject from the age of 5, if every single child spent 10 years sitting in those P4C circles, practicing how to wrestle with these dilemmas, learning how to listen to other perspectives, being forced to justify their own logic,
Would we end up with a society that is less polarized, less prone to tribalism?
would we be better at solving the complex global mysteries like climate change or political instability, which require us to think beyond our own goldfish?
Or, and this is the more cynical question, is the resistance to teaching thinking actually a kind of fear?
A fear of what?
Are we, as a society, actually a little bit afraid of what happens when you raise an entire generation of kids who are experts at questioning the status quo?
A thinking populace is a hard populace to control.
That is the dangerous and perhaps the most important question of all.
On that note, keep thinking about your thinking.
And thanks for listening.